Let's get back into some near-death experiences. You had spoken about a woman who was in a kayaking incident. I think I'm familiar with this incident. Could you elaborate on what happened there?
Yeah, her name is Dr. Mary Neal. She's a spine surgeon. She was kayaking with her husband and a group of people in Peru. Goes over a 20-foot drop, which she said is not, it's not horrific for kayakers who know what they're doing. But she ended up at an angle where she plunged in, and the force of it pushed her down, and the nose of her kayak got lodged between two boulders under the waterfall. And so she's pinned to the front of her boat. She can't even release her spray skirt because the pounding of the waterfall. And, she did everything she could. She's a surgeon. So she's used to panic situations, and she tried to release herself and pretty soon realized she shouldn't be alive still. And it was interesting because she said, right before that, when she realized she can't free herself, she said, I said, God, your will be done, whatever it is. She just had this kind of surrendered posture to God, your will be done. And she said, what was interesting is I'd always feared a drowning death, like oxygen starvation. That terrified me. And she said, I never felt that. Instead, as soon as she called out to God, she felt Jesus physically holding her. She wasn't even a very strong believer. She'd gone through medical school and kind of wandered away and kind of become more of an agnostic materialist. And so the first time she told me, she was very hesitant. She's like, who am I that Jesus would care about me or be holding me? But she said, but I knew without a doubt. And she's very logical and analytical. And she said, I was fascinated because on the one hand, I'm having this conversation with him, and she's having like this life review, which is another commonality of a near-death experience. She feels better than she's ever felt. This is more real than anything she's ever felt. But she's also aware that her knees are bending backward and breaking. So she realizes
Wow.
she's being like, her legs are, and she can somewhat feel it, but there's no pain in it. And then she feels this kind of like a pop, and boom, she's out of her body, up out of the water, and she's watching her friends panic, swimming around, trying to find her in the waterfall. And then she sees this, what many of them call a welcoming committee of these people. But these people, she said, and by the way, that welcoming committee appears, on the other side, from what I understand, we can appear to each other just like we normally do. Like this one bank president, Marv Besteman, said, yeah, I was in my favorite golf outfit. And the people I saw were in kind of their native garb, or whatever they would like. He saw, people from all countries. And, but sometimes they talk about these, they say they're like robes of white, but it's not robes of white. And it's interesting because that's found in Revelation, I think 3 and 5, somewhere like that, of, which I always thought, I don't want a robe of white, It doesn't sound good. But what I figured out is that they're actually translucent, and there is the light and love and life of God, which fills everything, coming out of them. So that's what Mary said she experienced, these people that she knew, and out of them was bursting this love that was light, welcoming her and greeting her. And she said it was the most joyous occasion. We hugged and we danced, and it was like this big party, this big celebration. And she said, because I knew these people. I had known them for as long as I existed. And then they began going down this path, this beautiful pathway, she said, lined with flowers. She loves flowers. And at the same time, though, she can see what's going on the riverbank. So she's having kind of almost this dual experience. And she ends up at this place, this large structure, and she can see in, and there are people in there, and it's a city. She says it's a city like bustling with life. There was life, there was activity. They were all busy doing something. But she said it was almost like there was this momentary, like stopping to acknowledge and just welcoming. She said, it was amazing. Who am I? I'm nobody. And yet I felt so accepted and so just welcomed in. And at another point, she had an encounter with Jesus, and I asked her, so what did he look like? Right? The question. And she said, this isn't going to make sense, but he looked like bottomless kindness and compassion. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, he had physical features, yes, but what just struck me is just bottomless kindness and compassion. Interestingly, a neurosurgeon, a neurologist that I interviewed, said something like that about standing there in the presence of God, that picture the kindest person you've ever pictured or known. You got to multiply it by thousands. And that's what he experienced, combined with the power of standing 5 feet away from a nuclear explosion. I mean, try to put all that in your head, you know, that's what blows your box open, right?
Yeah.
So Mary, interestingly, she asked Jesus, she said, man, this is so amazing. Like, why don't you give everybody this experience? Everybody would believe. And I love this because he quotes himself. What he said to Dr. Neal is what he said to Thomas, who's called Doubting Thomas. He's the disciple who, when Jesus was resurrected, wasn't there when Jesus first showed up to his followers. And they were telling Thomas, and he's like, I don't believe it. I'm not going to believe it until I stick my finger in the hole in his side. And Jesus shows up again, and he says, you know, hey, Thomas, touch me. See, I'm not a ghost. I'm physical. He eats fish with them. You know, they touch him. So he says, stick your hand in and see, I'm real. And then Jesus said to Thomas, blessed are you because you have seen, but even more blessed are those who have believed and yet not seen. And that's what he said to Mary. Which is like, I love that. Jesus quoting himself.
Yeah. Wow.
So she comes back and, I mean, it completely changed her. She was a materialist doctor, you know?
Is she the one who also was told that her son would die?
Yes. So when she came back, so she didn't want to come back. So this is another commonality of near-death experiencers. What they've told me is when you are in God's presence, you are with your best friend, the greatest dad you could ever imagine, and love that doesn't even compare to the most wonderful spouse or romantic lover, which sounds bizarre, but God's not a male or female. We're created in his image, not him and ours. I use him. The Bible uses him, but it says male and female created in his image. So, yeah, I mean, they don't want to come back. So she didn't want to come back, and she was fighting. This is another thing I love, Shawn, is that people in God's presence are themselves. You know, their same sense of humor, their same, whatever things about them they had. And many times they argue with him, and he gets it. He understands us. So she was very stubborn about it. Like, I am not going back. She had 2 little kids at the time, and she loved her kids, but that's how great it is. And that's common. And so he said to her, look, your son is not going to make it past age 18, or he's going to die at age 18 or something like that. And your family's going to need you to get through that. And then she came back. And at first, she tried to disprove her own near-death experience. She's like, that felt so real, but I want it to not be real because of what she was told was going to happen. And, but searching all the records of what happened to her and everything, and then hearing about others too, and she realized, no, it's real. And she didn't talk about it because, one, and she didn't write about it at first because how do you say to your kids, yeah, I didn't want to come back for you?
Yeah.
That's what she told me. I couldn't explain that to them. And then she had a time when her son was probably 16 or 17. And there was something they were talking about, when he's married and 30 or 40 and has kids of his own and all that. And he looked at her and he said something like, Mom, I'm not going to live that long. And she was like, it really struck her. But
can you say that again? Her son said
her son kind of knew somehow that he wasn't going to live that long. And so then, sure enough, it was right after he was 18, and he was hit by a car and killed. And I'll tell you, an interesting thing, Shawn, is Mary. Mary is a friend of mine, and she told me, and my wife Kathy, I know how wonderful it's going to be in the life to come. And I know how good God is, and I saw how his plan works together. It all works together, and it makes sense in the end, but it doesn't take away a mother's grief. It doesn't take away your grief for your friend you lost.
Yeah.
You still have to go through that. And it was hard for her.
I'll bet.